Why this koila mining deep? Message correct? Why this koila mining deep? Attention please.
Well, good morning. You're watching Breakfast News on NDTV 24/7. The big story that's unfolding is what's happening in Pakistan. Well, of course, Pakistan's Prime Minister has allayed fears of the army taking between the civilian government and the military establishment rose to a new high. Now, he says democracy is Pakistan's destiny and elections will be held on time. Now, this statement came a day after of high tension, which began with Pakistan's intelligence agency ISI issuing a sharply worded statement warning of serious ramifications after the Prime Minister Gilani criticized the ISI and army chiefs for their stand on the memo issue. Now, just minutes later, Mr. Gilani sacked his defense secretary, who is considered close to the army chief, but the day ended with Mr. Gilani saying that the civilian government has always supported the army, but the big question remains, is this an uneasy and temporary truce?
देखें, ये बताएं कि हम कब फौज के साथ नहीं खड़े रहे। पहले हमेशा हमने साथ दिया है, मगर जहां रूल्स ऑफ बिजनेस की बात होगी तो वहां वायलेशन नहीं होनी चाहिए। आई वाज शॉक्ड टू हियर the comments of the Chief Justice of Pakistan that I am a dishonest man. जमहूरियत मुल्क में रहेगी और जमहूरियत डेस्टिनी है पाकिस्तान के लिए, वो इसकी डेस्टिनी बन चुकी है and all idaras would be working under the civil government.
The ISI statement, which escalated the row, said there can be no allegation more serious than what the Prime Minister has levelled against the Chief of Army Staff and the DG ISI. Now, this has very serious ramifications with potentially grievous consequences for the country. Now, that statement was in response to what Prime Minister Gilani told a Chinese daily a week earlier, that the army and the ISI chief's submissions to the Supreme Court on the Memo Gate issue were unlawful. Now, the army and the civilian administration have been at each other's throats over the secret memo that was sent to the US government after the raid on Osama bin Laden, asking for help to ward off an army takeover in Pakistan. Now, the matter is before the country's Supreme Court. Gilani was upset with an affidavit submitted by Defense Secretary Khalid Naeem Lodi, which said the civilian government had no control over the operational matters of the army and the ISI. Gilani responded by saying it was unacceptable for the army to act like a state within a state.
लेकिन अनकॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मूव जो भी होगी वो गलत होगी, वो मुल्क को इंस्टेबिलिटी की तरफ लेके जाएगी, वो मुल्क में और ज्यादा मसाइल पैदा करेगी। पाकिस्तान तो और बहुत सारे मसाइल से पहले ही शिकार है। पाकिस्तान, मुझे ये लगता है कि शायद अल्लाह ना करे इस तरह की कैफियत हो कि अगर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को फॉलो ना किया गया तो यहाँ पे सिचुएशन बहुत बुरी हो जाएगी।
मैं तो ये समझता हूँ कि डेमोक्रेसी बिल्कुल हर हाल में रहनी चाहिए, लेकिन जो मौजूदा सूरत हाल चल रही है गवर्नमेंट के दरमियान और अदलिया के दरमियान, तो बेहतर है कि गवर्नमेंट अपनी जो है रिजाइन कर दे और किसी दूसरी गवर्नमेंट को आने का मौका दे।
चीफ जस्टिस साहब बहुत अच्छे आदमी हैं। चीफ जस्टिस का काम नहीं है लोगों को गर्दन से पकड़ के उतारना। हाँ, चीफ जस्टिस साहब एक काम कर सकते हैं, चीफ जस्टिस साहब फौज को ऑर्डर दे सकते हैं कि इस करप्ट हुकूमत को कानून से पकड़ के किक आउट करें।
तो आर्मी को आगे डिमोरलाइज किया जा रहा है और जो अमेरिका भी जो चाह रहा है, जिस तरह बड़ी कुफ्ते चाह रही है कि हमारी फौज को डिमोरलाइज किया जाए, मेरा नहीं ख्याल है कि आर्मी कैसे को टेक ओवर करेगी और ये थ्रू सुप्रीम कोर्ट का जो फैसला है उसी के तहत ही सारा कुछ होगा।
Now, amid the turmoil created by rising tensions between the military establishment and the civilian government, an emergency session of Parliament has been called today to discuss a warning from the Supreme Court that action could be taken against the President and the Prime Minister for failing to reopen corruption cases against President Sartari. And tracking all those developments in Pakistan is PTI correspondent Reza Lakshkar, who joins us on the phone line. Well, good morning, Reza. What is the latest that you can get on those developments? We've seen the day end with a truce, but would you term it as an uneasy truce between the military and the civilian government?
Well, I think, the tensions between the government and the military haven't reduced in any way, because Prime Minister Gilani in the evening yesterday defended his actions of sacking the Defense Secretary And also, he reiterated that the Army and the ISI chiefs had not followed procedures while filing replies to the Supreme Court. So obviously, when the Parliament convenes this afternoon and, the lawmakers start discussing these issues, we'll possibly get a sense of what the government intends to do. But, as you said, it's a very uneasy, a very difficult sort of a situation, and both sides seem to have very little options, to reach some sort of a common ground.
Right. At this point, is the Army also in a huddle on what's the next move?
Yes, General Kayani is expected to meet his principal staff officers, and there are some reports that possibly even the Corps commanders may be called in for a meeting today.
Right. Also, Reza, on that emergency session of Parliament with the Supreme Court warning on corruption cases against President Zardari, what can you expect?
Well, the Pakistan People's Party is not in a majority, so it's obvious that, they will have to have some sort of a debate, and they will be looking to their allies to support them. We had the Muttahida Qawmi Movement chief Altaf Hussain saying very late last night that, there should not be any confrontation between state institutions. So obviously even the PPP's allies are not, they want some sort of measures to diffuse this situation. So, obviously they will be trying to debate, and possibly the Pakistan People's Party may want the Parliament to give some sort of backing to its position with regard to both the Army and the judiciary.
Right. Reza ul Laskar, the PTI correspondent there, thanks very much for joining us and updating us on what's likely to happen today. The Army also in a huddle, and the Pakistan Parliament are having an emergency session today. And Pakistan's Tehreek-e-Insaf chairman Imran Khan has tweeted on the face-off between the Pakistan government and the judiciary, saying people of Pakistan have fought valiantly for a free judiciary, and we stand by the Chief Justice and the Supreme Court's verdict on the National Reconciliation Ordinance. Well, in just a few minutes from now, thousands of students in Madhya Pradesh will perform the Surya Namaskar, attempting a world record. But Muslim leaders have issued a fatwa against the event, terming it as an un-Islamic move and equated it with adult worship, prohibited in Islam. Now, the school education department, though, has made elaborate arrangements to ensure maximum participation in the Surya Namaskar exercise, so world record can be created by registering the feat in the Guinness Book of World Records. Well, in what can be termed as the most horrific case of medical negligence, an elderly paralyzed man at a government hospital in Jodhpur has been bitten by rats. Worse, the patient was in the intensive care unit and on life support system, leading to serious worries over his condition. Now, the Rajasthan government has now initiated a probe and promises tough action against all hospital authorities guilty of negligence and in this shocking case.
Iqbal's struggle for survival has now become a lot tougher. With a blood clot in his brain, he's been in the ICU of Jodhpur's MDM hospital for over 2 months. And after rats nibbled at his ears, nose, lips and cheeks on Tuesday night, his condition has worsened, leaving many here shaken at this horrific negligence.
ICU में अगर कोई चूहा किसी व्यक्ति को अगर काट ले तो एक आम वार्ड की बात क्या करें? अगर ICU में अगर किसी चूहे ने जाके काट सकता है तो कोई आम पब्लिक अगर कहीं पे कोई सो रहा है तो उसके हालत कैसे हो सकती है?
What makes matters worse is that while his body was being nibbled by rats, none of the medical staff in the ICU even noticed the rodent attack, which had damaged even the patient's ventilator tubes. Ultimately, it was the patient's daughter who raised an alarm after noticing bloodstains and scratches on her father's face. But now the government promises action against the guilty.
But let me assure you, whether it's the junior staff, the senior staff, the senior most staff, if anybody is found responsible for this incident, and shocking incident I would say, we'll take severe action against them.
But this isn't the first time that rats have attacked patients in Jodhpur's government hospitals. A few years ago, an infant was attacked by rodents in the Umaid hospital, and doctors say they will now seek professional help. And citizens, let's find out how they're reacting. Tell us, a 70-year-old man inside an ICU, a critical care unit, and being bitten by rats. How do you react to that?
So it's really very shocking news, and how to know that that old people suffered by rat or in hospital. So common people, then after this news, they are not believe on hospital and doctors. That's a
so really shocking.
Yes, it's really shocking.
Right. What do you think, sir? This incident. Do you think this is a one-off, or when you go to government hospitals, do you find that this kind of neglect, this apathy of the staff, is something that you experience quite commonly? And would you take one of your family members now to a government hospital?
This is definitely not a one-off case, and rats moving around government hospitals is a very common sight, and I don't know how they're going to tackle this, and especially keeping in mind that it was in ICU. Rats in the ICU, it's unpardonable, it's unimaginable, disgusting.
Disgusting. So would you take one of your relatives, your son, daughter, somebody to a government hospital, or would you rather go to the private sector now?
With rats roaming around in the ICU, I don't think I would like to take my loved ones to any government hospital. Definitely not. Definitely not. Yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us. So, Kulsoom, as you can see, people's confidence in government hospitals badly dented by this horrific, example of negligence, and clearly patients, their relatives across Rajasthan really finding it tough to believe that such an incident could have happened, and certainly all those who've come to know about it are deeply anguished, extremely angry. Kulsoom?
Right, Rajan Mahan, thanks very much for joining us. Understandable reactions from all those people out there. What do you say? Who would want to take anybody, to a hospital where, there are rats, even in the ICU? Put rats in a hospital. That both these things don't come together. Rajan Mahan, thanks very much for joining us. But then what do people do when they really can't afford the private hospitals? On one hand, we are talking about this great medical tourism, sir, but on the other hand, we are talking about the government hospitals where a majority of the people have to go with no choice. And can you ever accept rats inside a hospital?
It's a shameful thing to get noticed such an incidents. But I would say rodent menace is common to many buildings. It's not a question of specifically government hospital. It's a hospital menace. See, there are false ceilings and people eat food in the hospitals. This brings rodent there. Many ICUs do not have separate chambers to keep the food items which are served to the patients in form of feeding. So this could be the one reason.
But for a man who's paralyzed, who
this
move,
man could not.
He's sicker than he was before going into the hospital. That's not acceptable.
It is not acceptable. I'm not justifying. I'm not justifying. You see, I'm alarmed. I'm shaken, and I am very much disturbed by this news myself. But you see, in any building where there is a false ceiling, even I have seen a cat jumping down from the false ceiling of an ICU. I would not name the hospital. This is more dangerous for the mechanics, the wires, the circuitry, the delicate tubes which we handle in the ICU, and that's really a rodent menace.
I mean, what's really tragic is that the government reacts to it after. When we know that there is a rat menace in all government hospitals, as you say, the government reacts to it after the media takes it up, after people reacting to it. You don't know whether to laugh at an issue like this, or really, on the other hand, we're talking about the great medical tourism boom in India.
No, I'm deeply concerned about it, and I have pointed out the reasons why do the rodents come there.
No, but do authorities do more to prevent?
It's very easy. You see, there is an organization, Pest Control of India, which would be very happy to help if we go to them. And Pest Control should voluntarily visit such places.
So how often do they visit in a government?
I don't know how they are involved with the medical system, but they should. Through your channel, I'm suggesting to them that since they can afford it themselves to go to the such institutions, they should regularly make it a point to visit institutions like this, especially hospitals, and tackle this, because this is not a difficult job. And this would be, for them it is because they are professional body. For them it is not a difficult job. Yes, it is not.
Right.
And I would repeat it because it is a need of the hour that since congestion is increasing, the density of all the buildings is increasing, and people bring food to the hospital, there should be adequate facility, separate facility of eating. Right. And even the staff bring food sometimes to the hospital.
And the staff were asleep at 11 o'clock?
This is not acceptable. This is not acceptable. This is not acceptable. And I doubt how can they sleep like this. You see, ICU staff is supposed to be alert around the clock. And they are changed, their duties are changed, they are giving duly off to compensate their sleep if they are working at night, doing night duties. So this is a point which should be looked into by the supervisors.
Right.
The nurse supervisors takes round usually at midnight.
Right.
When I was a student, I saw my matron taking round at 12 o'clock midnight or 1 o'clock midnight just to see and check that nurses are working, they are on the job.
Right.
They are alert, they are awake.
So at all levels we see that things have really failed. But Dr. Wali, I'm really running out of time.
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Discussed from just about everybody who is part of the medical fraternity, people who visit hospitals. How would you really react to rats actually chewing up a man lying in the ICU who's helpless, and the staff? They're just asleep by 11 o'clock. Well, that's the story we continue to track, get more reactions to that. Let's see what the government really does. Let's hope they get the rodent care people and get this thing, menace, really sorted at more regular intervals. Now, in other news, as poll-bound states get into election mode, parties are fighting it out and quite literally tussle between the ruling Shiromani Akali Dal and the Congress workers at the Alpura Bhai village turned violent. 4 vehicles were smashed and many rounds were fired in the air, creating tension in the village and surrounding areas. The local MLA accused the police of coming in late even after being informed. Later, the CRPF was deployed to control the situation. The Supreme Court is likely to defer its verdict in the hit-and-run case by Mumbai businessman Alistair Anthony Pereira. An allegedly drunk Pereira lost control over his car and drove it over people sleeping by the roadside in November 2006. 7 construction workers were killed and 8 others injured. The trial court let off Pereira with a nominal 6-month sentence, which led to a huge public outcry. The Bombay High Court then on its own examined the judgment and enhanced the jail term to 3 years, convicting him on charges of unintentional killing. Pereira challenged his conviction in the Supreme Court and he has been on bail since 2007. And Bhelpur village in Bihar had a high-profile yet unusual visitor, Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister Kamla Persad Besar. Hundreds of people from the village and surrounding areas gathered to get a glimpse of who they called their daughter Prime Minister. The Prime Minister of the Caribbean Islands for the first time set foot on the land of her ancestors yesterday. And security arrangements were tight as the helicopter landed at specially constructed helipad near the village in Ithari block of Buxar districts, about 125 kilometers from Patna. The moment she arrived, there was a roar of applause and cheering from the waiting crowds. And the Cabinet Committee on Security is likely to give its approval today to the Home Ministry's ambitious plan to set up the National Counter-Terrorism Centre. Now, after the committee is not, the NCTC will be the nodal agency for all counter-terrorism activities, and intelligence agencies like Intelligence Bureau, Research and Analysis Wing and State Intelligence Agencies. Now, these agencies will report to it on matters related to terrorism. The NCTC will then streamline terror-related intelligence, analyze and provide them for action to concerned agencies. The NCTC was proposed by Home Minister P. Chidambaram months after 26/11, but has faced much opposition within the government, including that of the PMO. Now, the U.S. is trying to reduce President Karzai's fears by reiterating its support for Afghan-led talks with the Taliban. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has said there's no quid pro quo for talks with the Taliban, and it had been decided, but there have been reports of prisoners being released from Guantanamo in return for the Taliban attending talks.
We are prepared to support an Afghan-led process of reconciliation, and we will participate in that in support of the Afghans if we believe it holds promise for an end to the conflict. So we have worked to help establish a reconciliation process and real negotiations, and we have been very grateful for the assistance that the government of Qatar has provided, and we have not